is Mike Serbola. I'm here, about myself, I have taught all grades. I was fortunate enough to be a uncertified teacher. They were desperate. I have a technical background in science and math. The reason I'm here is I went to Deerfield Beach High School as a student, and in Rapid City, where I spent a number of years, Rapid City unfortunately was the first community to have a student walk in with a shotgun. And as we all know, our community has had some serious things happen lately as well. In fact, I'm not going to ask you questions. I know you can't answer it, but it is a federal statistic, not mine, it's not my opinion, that 1 out of 5 children before reaching the age of 18 has been exposed to something that has met a degree of criminal prosecutability, not just something that would make a parent upset. And this is our government's federal statistics. These come out every 4 years. They are not mentioned. I do not know why. But here's the deal. There's nobody between those kids and what's happening to them other than you. There's no one who has a hat whose job it is. The people who gather the statistics, our federal government, also gather statistics on how much salad they're eating and a bunch of other things. That's what's published. This statistic has been out there for a decade. I wrote about it 15 years ago. I'm not the only one. I don't want to discuss this statistic. That's not why I'm here. It is 1 out of 5. You can look it up. So whose job is it? You are the only ones who can do anything. Okay? First off, how can you do it? It's not your job. Who's going to let you? And what can be done? Triage. You can find out what the numbers are. For our students, quarter-million students, real numbers. It's called anonymous polling. If it cost $1 million, I could ask you for $1 million and you'd be all impressed and give it to me. It involves a penny. You flip a penny. You ask the students. You tell them. If it's heads, you say yes. If it's tails, you answer the question. I had planned on giving you each a penny and inquiring as to whether your favorite pie was apple or pumpkin. It's a bit complicated because you can't answer, so I'm going to skip ahead. We could still do it. I could ask you to write on a piece of paper. Pick the top or the bottom. I could ask you to do it now if I can't ask you for your permission. But let's say you were to write on a piece of paper. I'd say, okay, pick one. You'd pick the top or the bottom. I'd say, okay, call the top heads, bottoms, tails. Now, if it were children, I can phrase this much more carefully. It's 3 minutes, it's the end of the day. It could be phrased as, and you will spend hours deliberating this. Believe me, the question can be phrased. Has anything happened that you were uncomfortable, that you felt trapped and you couldn't share with an adult? It could be that simple, and you can have an answer that will not upset parents. It won't upset the kids. If I ask, excuse me for pointing, but one of you, whether your favorite pie is apple or whatever, you won't tell me. But I can ask all of you. You'll say heads, heads, tails, tails, heads, 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 tails, tails. None of you will know whose favorite pie or whatever. Okay, so we can ask our children these tough questions. That is not an excuse. I'm out of time?
Yes, wrap up, please.
To wrap up, please consider, and perhaps we should have a discussion. We could have a meeting, board meetings, talk with you people, whatever is necessary. One thing I was very encouraged, you are all so motivated, and we're all talking about money. Please don't think about any of these things. It's not an issue of money. It is an issue of acknowledging that there's a problem and then worrying about it. If a child is on fire, and that's what we're talking about, this is literal abuse, and they're on fire now, not next month, not last month, it's not someone else's kids. As we're speaking, out of our 250,000 kids, students, 50 are newly being abused as we're speaking, and they're on fire, in pain now, this second. So it is not a matter of whose head is it. The CDC quietly changed the rules on everyone and mentioned, oh, by the way, this is transmittable community-wise, not familially, not within families. But if you're born within a community that starts to exhibit these problems, culturally, our brains respond. I can be raised in a convent. My brain will respond to what your children do. Do you understand this? If you don't, you need to. It is your responsibility. It is not a matter of a child being abused and they'll get over it. It is a physical change. It is not that they are thinking short. They are short. Their legs have been cut off. Sorry. Flip the coin, please. I would love to talk to you at a later point about this. It is very important. All our kids, we can find out now what the real number is.
tremors from this type of shift are minute. That's what causes the strange vibrations. Slow quakes gradually release the pressure built up in the plate. That's why Professor Obata once believed major earthquakes were unlikely to happen after slow quakes.
I thought it was just a way to get rid of excess energy. Since it doesn't affect us directly, I thought we should be thankful it was releasing pressure.
But after the devastating magnitude 9 trembler which struck off the coast of the Tohoku region, an expert found that a slow quake had occurred immediately before the major quake. The person who made the discovery was Yoshihiro Ito. At the time, he was a researcher at Tohoku University. Four months before the major quake, he'd set up a seismometer in the ocean off the coast of Tohoku. Data retrieved after the earthquake revealed new details. The tremors of the slow quake began about a month before the major quake. They continued right up to the Tohoku quake.
I think the movement of the Earth's crust was triggered by the slow quake. The data suggest this is likely as well.
Why did the major quake hit immediately after the slow quake, which was supposed to release pressure? New facts have come to light. The slow quake occurred east of the seismic source of the major quake. It occurred at the boundary of the same plate as the major quake. The slow quake lasted for about a month and shifted the plate about 40 centimeters. Ito believes this large movement triggered the major quake. What really happened here? The oceanic plate was sinking under the continental plate. The two plates were stuck together in a wide area called an asperity. This asperity was the seismic source of the megaquake. Pressure built up there over a long period of time. However, some areas around the asperity were only partly stuck together. Every time the pressure built up, the plate moved, and those areas moved with it. That is a slow quake. It was believed that these movements released the pressure built up between the plates. But off the coast of Tohoku, the slow quake lasted about a month, and the plate moved 40 centimeters. Pressure in the asperity had become too great. It was pulled by the tremors of the slow quake. And the entire asperity shifted. That's what Ito's research suggests. This is a model of the relationship between slow quakes and megaquakes. On the top is the continental plate. On the bottom, the oceanic plate. On the left is the wide asperity, which is tightly stuck. And on the right is the partly connected area where slow quakes occur. The oceanic plate sinks at an even speed. When viewed from above, the asperity remains firmly in place. But the partly connected area is starting to shift. This is what a slow quake looks like. If this kind of movement continues over a long period of time, the asperity is pulled rightward, and the entire plate shifts. The plate movements caused by the slow quake are shown here in yellow. They are thought to have occurred over an area of the seabed stretching 100 kilometers north to south off the coast of Tohoku. This huge movement is believed to have moved the entire enormous asperity at once.
What's important this time is that we were able to record that happening. We discovered how slow quakes are caused. I felt we needed to reevaluate the relationship between slow quakes and major earthquakes.
Professor Obara has made discoveries about slow quakes in the Nankai Trough. He was shocked to learn that the 2011 quake had happened immediately after a slow quake. When might a slow quake trigger a major earthquake? Off the coast of Tohoku, where the seismic source was far from the land, hardly any data exist concerning the slow quake in 2011. In the Nankai Trough, however, movements can be tracked from land in real time. Over 10 years' worth of data have been accumulated. Careful analysis of the data shows that slow quakes exhibit a certain pattern. In Mie Prefecture, for example, slow quakes occur every 6 months. They last about 10 days. In the Shikoku area, they occur once every 3 months. And last about a week. There are patterns behind the occurrence and the duration of slow quakes in different regions. Are there any variations in these patterns? Obata thinks that tracking them will help predict when major quakes will happen.
I think there will definitely be a change in slow quake patterns before the next megaquake hits. I want to detect the differences in where and when they occur.
Wakabayashi Ward in Sendai was hit by the tsunami that followed the Tohoku earthquake. Professor Obata was born and raised here. His memories of that day continue to drive his research.
I was really upset that I was unable to find a way to prevent this disaster. Actually, I felt helpless. The only way I can contribute is by using my current research on slow quakes to try to predict the next megaquake.
Scientists around the world are stepping up their research into the slowquake phenomenon. This type of tremor has been detected in 10 areas so far. Among them are New Zealand, Mexico, and Alaska. Megaquakes are considered likely in these places. The area around Seattle on the west coast of the U.S. is another. In 2012, a change occurred in the pattern of slowquakes, raising alarm among researchers. The slowquakes were concentrated in the Cascadia subduction zone along a coastal plate boundary. Scientists fear a magnitude 9 level earthquake could hit the area. Cities would experience violent shaking. And soon after, massive tsunami would engulf communities along the coast. Dr. Herb Draggart has been studying the patterns of slowquake development. In this region, slowquakes happen about once a year. They last about 3 weeks.
It appears to be cyclical, and that's one of our challenges, is to see if the deviations from any cyclical nature means something else, something new.
Slowquakes had once been fairly regular events. But the pattern changed significantly in 2012. In late August, a slow quake started north of Seattle and spread 600 kilometers north and south. It was still going more than 3 weeks later. Concerns that a massive quake was imminent rippled along the west coast.
This current slow slip quake under the Salish Sea has lasted 5 weeks. Last year's great earthquake and tsunami in Japan was preceded by slow slip and tremor near the epicenter. University of Oregon professor David Schmidt makes an analogy.
Even though the nudge is small, at some point that nudge might be enough to kind of tip us over the edge and cause the car to fall off the cliff.
It was so long-lived and covered so much area. Yes, it caught our interest, and we were wondering whether it was going to stop here.
The slow quake lasted 6 weeks, twice as long as normal. But it suddenly stopped spreading, and the tremor gradually subsided. What caused the slow quake to change its pattern? Why wasn't it followed by a massive trembler? Dr. Draggart plans to analyze the effects of the tremor, also known as an episodic tremor and slip, or ETS, on the seismic source area.
We don't fully understand that relationship yet, but we are convinced there is a connection. We are trying to establish the relationship of ETS to the occurrence of large earthquakes.
Researchers are working hard to decipher subtle hints that could warn of a megaquake. Some are using global positioning systems in their research. There are some 1,200 observation points across Japan. Researchers use satellites to record slight movements of the Earth down to the millimeter. This image shows ground movements captured by the GPS devices. East of the Nankai Trough, tectonic plates shift in a complicated manner. The area is off the coast, south of the Kanto region, where Tokyo is located. The Philippine Sea Plate slides underneath the Nankai Trough. The Izu Island chain is moving north along with the underlying plate. But the Izu Peninsula is moving west. What explains the different directions when the islands and the peninsula are on the same plate? A researcher in southwestern Japan is trying to solve the mystery. He's Professor Takao Tabe of Kochi University. His research has taken him to a reef called Zenisu. It's about 80 kilometers south of the Izu Peninsula. He wants to find out which direction Zenisu is moving in. The cluster of rocks sits on the Philippine Sea Plate. He has brought a portable GPS device to measure the movement. Tabe has discovered that Zenisu is shifting toward the west. just like the Izu Peninsula. The red area adjacent to the Nankai Trough is thought to be moving in a westerly direction. Tabei thinks something unusual is happening to the Philippine plate. He suspects the plate is split between the part that's moving north and the part that's moving west.
Here's where the boundary is commonly thought to be, but I think there's another border. It's being formed as we speak.
What is causing the tectonic plate to crack? Tabei thinks the Izu Peninsula is playing a part. The Izu Peninsula is on the Philippine Sea Plate. The peninsula is pressed against the continental plate, unable to move any further. The Philippine Sea Plate keeps getting pushed from behind. The intense pressure is causing the split. Tabei believes the Philippine Sea Plate is starting to sink along the split. The plate's new boundary probably runs about 50 kilometers east of the Nankai Trough. This would mean the source area of a potential megaquake has spread eastward, closer to the Tokyo area.
If a new plate boundary is created, earthquakes could occur around it, and they could generate huge tsunamis.
If the seismic source area has extended further east, a tsunami could hit the Kanto region sooner than previously thought. Associate Professor Ikuo Abe has conducted tsunami simulations to learn how they work. If a massive trembler occurred in the seismic source area that was previously suggested by the government, a tsunami over 10 meters tall could reach the Kanto region in little more than an hour. But what if the source area had spread 50 kilometers to the east and a magnitude 8 level quake occurred? It would only take 14 minutes for a 10-meter high tsunami to hit cities like Fujisawa and Kamakura in Kanagawa Prefecture, southwest of Tokyo. The wall of water would follow major roads and quickly reach the centers of those cities. People would have little time to escape. Most of the coastal communities would be flooded. "45 minutes after the onset of the quake, the tsunami would flow into Tokyo Bay. The 3-meter tall tsunami would reach the bay over 30 minutes sooner than previously predicted.